Rebecca Nagel here. Before we get into this episode, I wanted to let you know that you can hear episodes of First America early and ad-free by signing up for Pushkin Plus. You'll also get bonus episodes, full audiobooks, and other binges from your favorite Pushkin hosts and authors. Find Pushkin Plus on the First America show page on Apple Podcasts or at pushkin.fm/plus. Let's get into it. Just a heads up before we get started. This episode includes descriptions of violence against Indigenous people. Please take care while you listen. Let me see if there's a spot to pull over, like right here. I think I'm all the way off the road. Yeah. All right. Okay. This past fall, I drove with my producer, Jordan, to a small town in eastern Tennessee.
All right, so where are we right now?
We are in a bend of the Hiawassee River. We're kind of in the middle of someone's farm. He's actually on the tractor right now farming. There's a horse and a donkey and a bunch of farm equipment. And you can see a really beautiful hill in the distance that I think is on the other side of the river. So we're like walking distance from the river.
It is just kind of wild. Like even the person is farming right now as we are talking may not know the history of this land.
Yeah. Hi! He yelled at us. We're just recording some tape for a podcast.
You're just sightseeing.
A man in short sleeves, jeans, and a baseball cap climbed off his tractor to come and talk to us. He was friendly.
Yeah, we're talking about the history of the Trail of Tears in the area. We're recording a podcast. Sorry to pull you off your tractor. Yeah.
Actually, where I live at, that's part of it up there, too, Trail of Tears. Up
wow.
through there, right in on that river up in there.
He told me he knows this land was part of the Trail of Tears.
Well, the Indians, they lived up there, too, because I've got a garden up there, and I pick up stuff up there all the time, too. Arrowheads and hatchets and mill rocks and stuff, you know. It's amazing. Every time I pick up one, I think, my gosh, how many years ago?
Yeah, how long ago?
Indian,
we're just recording about some of the history in the area.
I've been picking up Indian arrows around here all my life.
Oh, really? How long have you lived here?
Well, I'm 65, born and raised up here, working this farm. I actually live up on the Upper River Road up there.
Okay. Yeah, well, I don't mean to take you away from plowing your field and bothering you, but yeah, we're just...
She's talking about planting tulips.
Oh, that's all going to be tulips? You guys are going to do a little tulip farm?
Spring, 12 or 13,000.
Wow, that'll be really pretty. I'll come back in the spring.
What are your thoughts and feelings being here? It's like they're going to put tulips.
Yeah.
How is this making you feel? I mean,
it's just a really heavy place. Yeah, it's just a really heavy place. If you ask, like, the average American, has the United States ever had a concentration camp on U.S. soil? I don't think people would think of this place. In 1838, this was part of Fort Cass, which was a concentration camp where Cherokees were kept. The United States federal government and also the states here in the South, they wanted all Indigenous people in the Southeast to be gone. My family has a complicated relationship to this place. Some of my ancestors signed Cherokee Nation's removal treaty. They thought it was the tribe's best chance at survival. But most Cherokees didn't agree. The treaty set a deadline for Cherokees to leave their homeland. And so the U.S. military rounded them all up at gunpoint. 7,000 soldiers and militiamen went out into all of the Cherokee towns. And it took 25 days for them to round everybody up and put them into concentration camps. People weren't allowed to collect possessions, so people weren't allowed to even find loved ones. There was a pregnant woman who was actually in labor. So they drove her from one of the remote valley towns in North Carolina and forced her to walk. And she gave birth, and they would still not let her rest. And then close to this place, she died.
That's horrifying.
Yeah. I think when people think about the Trail of Tears, they're like, oh, it was violent because people had to walk a long distance. But actually the most violent part of our removal was in the camps. Disease was really rampant. And I think disease is this stand-in for why Native people died in a way that lets the United States off the hook. But often it was the violence and the disease worked hand in hand. Yeah, I don't know. It's really heavy. Yeah. I think what strikes me is just how deeply you can feel the collective forgetting of what happened here. That it's just a field and a subdivision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I started this project, I was on a quest of sorts. I wanted to answer a question. It's a big question, but also kind of simple. How do I fit? How do Native people fit in American democracy?
What democracy rounds an entire ethnic group up at gunpoint and puts them into a concentration camp?
You're listening to First America, the true story of how the United States came to be, and how our current political moment is 250 years in the making. From Pushkin Industries and Critical Frequency, I'm your host, Rebecca Nagel. Gohin Dawadon, Jaleka Yetli citizen of Cherokee Nation. Before I made this history podcast, I reported on the Supreme Court. I followed one case where my tribe could have lost our reservation, and another one where all tribes could have lost the special legal status that protects everything from our land to our kids. During that reporting, I traveled to D.C. to attend oral arguments. It was the first time I stepped inside the Supreme Court building. The room was full of Native people who traveled thousands of miles to come watch. They had lined up before dawn to get a seat. To enter the courtroom, we had to go through security twice. A guard made one Native woman put a T-shirt over her traditional clothes. Otherwise, she'd have to leave.
One of the guards, she was like, listen, political attire isn't allowed. And I told her, I was like, this is my culture, this is my religious practice, this is my traditional attire.
I sat behind more senior white Supreme Court reporters. I watched two of them walk past a security guard, yelling at them to stop. They just ignored her. Before the proceedings started, I stood up to get a look around the room. I was told to sit down. When the white reporter stood up, no one said anything. A big part of our democracy, and especially our courts, is this idea of fairness. In this case about Native rights, it felt like the perfect example of how the rules aren't the same for everyone.
We will hear argument this morning in Holland versus Brackeen and the consolidated cases. Mr. McGill?
That day of oral arguments was one of those 14-hour days that started before the sun came up and ended after it went down. When I was finally walking back to my hotel, I got lost. I was too tired to navigate the maze of D.C. streets. I sat down on the steps of a manicured office building and cried. I had thought my job was to fix the inaccurate and, let's be real, racist media narrative around these important cases. I wanted the Supreme Court to not harm my community, or at least harm it less. But what I felt in those sobs was powerless. As Native people, we were still defending such basic things. Power over our land, over our children, and we had to jump through so many hoops to even do that. And that question of how Native people fit into U.S. democracy, I didn't have the words for exactly what, but I knew something was wrong. The past 2 episodes, we talked about the lead up to the Revolutionary War. We talked about the Boston Tea Party, the Declaration of Independence, and why the colonists rebelled. In this episode, we are looking at the war itself. As a country, we talk about the war as if it was fought between England and the colonies. It's a story of David standing up to Goliath, and we get to be David. Like everyone else, that's the story I learned in school. But as an adult, I found out that story was wrong.
Turn left onto Great Gully Road.
Okay, so it's supposed to be at this corner.
See anything there? Let's look up here.
That's the site of Cayuga Castle, New York 90 and Great Gully Road.
I was looking for a historical marker. We didn't see the marker from the car, so we got out and walked around.
What's the weather like today?
Balmy, beautiful upstate New York day. It is heavy and gray, as it usually is this time in November.
This is Scott Manning Stevens,
which is my settler name. Golonyok Dache is my Mohawk name. I'm a citizen of the Akwesasne Mohawk Nation and a member of the Bear Clan.
He's the director of Native American and Indigenous Studies at Syracuse University in New York. Scott's tribe, the Mohawk, is part of a larger Indigenous confederacy, and that confederacy played a big role in the Revolutionary War. You've probably heard of them as the Iroquois, but that's just what the French called them.
We call ourselves collectively the Haudenosaunee, which means people of the Long House.
The Confederacy was originally made up of 5 tribes.
So starting with the Mohawk, then the Oneida, the Onondaga in the center, the Cayuga, and then the Seneca.
The tribes came together under a peace agreement around 1,000 years ago. Many consider the Haudenosaunee one of the oldest democracies on Earth. It's 4 times older than the United States.
Certainly popular with the pigeons.
Scott and I were standing on the side of a 2-lane highway. We still hadn't found the marker, but from Google Maps, we knew we were close. This place, that's now fields and farmland and highway, was once the capital of Cayuga Nation, one of the tribes in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy.
So if you were to close your eyes and imagine what this would have looked like in 1778, can you describe it?
Beautiful. I love the Finger Lakes. They're these really, they're quite long, but thin, so you can see across them easily. And I find them kind of serene. It would have been forested in some places and farmland and others. There'd be a number of large traditional style longhouses.
Can you describe what would have happened here in 1779?
I imagine just chaos if we assume that troops behaved the way that Washington urged them to behave, to come shrieking in with bayonets drawn into a village to terrify the population. It had to be utterly terrifying. And they're burning and laying waste to everything.
During the Revolutionary War, part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy sided with the Americans, but a bigger part sided with the British. A few years into the war, a group of British troops and Mohawk warriors attacked colonists. George Washington ordered a scorched earth campaign as retribution. General John Sullivan led the campaign. He used an entire third of Washington's army to destroy dozens of Haudenosaunee towns. His men targeted food so that the people would starve. The army would spend days slashing and burning acres of corn. Then they would pile the bushels into houses and set it all on fire. They destroyed over 11 million pounds of corn this way. The army also killed hundreds of civilians. In one early massacre, militiamen speared children with bayonets.
So you were running for your lives, and you saw behind you everything you knew being burned down.
More than 5,000 refugees of Sullivan's campaign made it to Fort Niagara. which was still controlled by the British. The British wouldn't let the refugees inside the fort, and so they camped around it. The British gave them food, but not enough for people to survive.
And probably, 500 or more are dead by the spring.
Some historians estimate that during Sullivan's campaign, between direct killing, exposure, and malnutrition, half of all Haudenosaunee people died.
Do historians consider Sullivan's campaign an act of genocide?
I mean, we do.
Scott and I got back in his car and kept looking for that historical marker. Like often happens, we were close. It was a few hundred yards down the road. We pulled over on a little patch of dirt and got out.
Can you describe what it looks like?
So it's a almost 6 foot tall upright stone, and it has a bronze plaque, but there's a map of this region of central New York and the various routes that the soldiers took in attacking the different Haudenosaunee communities across the region.
What does it feel like to see a monument celebrating that?
Well, it's a bitter thing, and it would be hard to imagine this in a country like Germany today, because it would be read as genocidal and like, oh, we should take that down. This kind of desire to utterly destroy a people is something that you wouldn't think would be easily celebrated.
Some people might say what happened to the Haudenosaunee during the Revolutionary War, while horrific and tragic, is just part of what happens during war. After all, they attacked colonial settlements too. But during this period, colonial militias attacked Native communities that were neutral or allied with the United States, communities that were peaceful. One of those communities was called Ojibwe. It was a congregation of Lenapes and Mohicans who had converted to Christianity through German missionaries. In 1782, after warriors from a different tribe killed and captured some colonists, the militia of Washington County, Pennsylvania, went to investigate Ojibwe. When the militiamen reached the area, they told the congregation they just wanted to take them to a nearby fort where they would be safe from the British. The congregation was cautious, but eventually opened their doors and even offered the militia food. The militia separated the men and women into 2 buildings and tied everyone up. And then they took a vote. Would they take the captives to the fort, or would they kill them? The militiamen chose slaughter. Knowing they would die the next day, the Christian natives spent the night singing hymns. Both this German sect of Christianity and Lenape and Mohican cultures had songs for death and believed that singing them aided spirits in their passage. The militiamen spent the night drinking communion wine and preparing 2 killing houses, one for men and one for women and children. In the morning, the militia took congregation members into the killing houses, 2 at a time. They used a large wooden and metal mallet made to pound iron to kill each person with a blow to the head. Then they scalped and piled the bodies. We know what happened thanks in part to 2 children who survived. One, named Thomas, was knocked unconscious and scalped by the militia members. He awoke to dead friends and family members being stacked around him. He didn't move. As it got dark, he hid behind the house and then escaped to another village. Before the militiamen left, they burned the bodies of all the townspeople and the buildings they had killed and stacked them in. They looted and ransacked the town, and then they left with what they had taken: horses, blankets, food, and the scalps of 30 men, 32 women, and 34 children. Congress and the state of Pennsylvania ordered an investigation, but no one was ever held accountable. The UN defines genocide as the intent to destroy a group of people, in whole or in part. The term was coined in the 1940s, but has been applied to historical events. The popular story of the Revolutionary War is wrong. It wasn't just a fight for liberty and freedom or even independence. It was also a sprawling conflict over who would control the continent of North America. And to stake out their claim, the United States was willing to commit unspeakable acts of violence. It's a big shift in how we talk about this war and how we think about it and how we teach it to our children. The Revolutionary War was also a campaign of genocide. When I started seeing the revolution this way, I stopped asking, how do I fit into this democracy? And started asking a different question, one that has broader implications and higher stakes and is frankly just scary. Is this even a democracy? Was it ever? That answer after the break. In this quest to figure out U.S. democracy, I decided I needed to talk to an expert.
The first thing we're going to do is just get your level.
Someone who understands the structure of our government better than I do.
Could you just tell me what you had for breakfast?
The awkward thing is I haven't yet had breakfast. I had coffee. It's been that kind of a day.
And so I sat down with a constitutional law professor.
Yes, I am Maggie Blackhawk. I teach law at NYU Law School, and I'm Fond du Lac Band Ojibwe. Should I say my formal title? I'm Maggie Blackhawk and the Moses Grossman Professor of Law at NYU Law School.
I've known Maggie for years. She's really helped me shape how I think about these issues. And so first I wanted to get her take on my original question. How do Native people fit into U.S. democracy? I'm a citizen of the United States, but I'm also a citizen of Cherokee Nation. And my tribe has a nation-to-nation relationship with the federal government that's based on the treaties that we signed.
I feel like I've had, as like a Native person, when I think about my relationship to the government, like I have that relationship as an individual, but then I also have a relationship through my tribal nation.
But what relationship is that?
Like between Cherokee Nation
Between you and your tribal nation and the United States. What is that relationship? If you had to put a word on it.
Oh, God. I mean, old.
What about now?
I mean, I guess it would be nation to nation. I mean, it's
like France to the United States.
But we're subordinated.
Like you are, and it's a big word, subordinated. You're unequal. But what would you call it? I know you want to call it government to government. And, but when I press on that, it doesn't quite fit.
I mean, it's a relationship of like the people who've been colonized to the people who colonized
There you go. We got a word. But it took a long time. And if you actually ask most Native people, okay, what's the relationship? They will stumble over it. I
think it's just because it's so hard to say that. Like, because I think we want to assert the sovereignty that we still have.
What Maggie got me to say is this. My relationship to the federal government is that it colonized me and my tribe. It's hard to admit, but that's how I fit into U.S. democracy. I think that's what I felt that day at the Supreme Court before I had words for it. That despite all the things that Indigenous people have done to assert our sovereignty, our self-determination, we are still stuck under the foot of this government that has done so much harm. It's hard to reconcile that with the story of America I was taught in school. I think when we think about the founding of the United States, it feels like the myth is this idea that our founding fathers created this great democracy that rejected the tyranny of the King of England. Is that the full story of our government?
No. The story we tell ourselves about the United States origins as throwing off a king, throwing off monarchy and establishing democracy, leaves out empire.
Maggie says that story of our founders building a democracy, it's only half true. Part of the government they built was democratic, but part of the government they built was something else.
They wanted to be a, quote, empire for liberty from the beginning. So the break with Britain was less about throwing the colonialism behind and more about throwing the king behind.
So it's kind of like democracy for us, colonialism for them.
Yeah, no, exactly right.
In terms of sort of the fight in the U.S. over sort of, are we a democracy? Are we sort of not living up to those ideals?
It's even a harder question, I think.
Do
I have a position on it? I think when you bring in the story of expansion and colonialism, it just explodes the conversation because it's not even about building a government that just doesn't give everyone the same kind of political power. It really is that the U.S. is building governments that are not representative.
When the U.S. expanded into native territories and later into places like Guam and Puerto Rico, those places didn't get democracy.
So you wouldn't have elections, you wouldn't have accountability. This was not the American dream that the Constitution at least promised for those who were within the polity and within the several states.
In the early years of our country, unelected leaders governed 2/3 of all land in the United States. The only person they answered to was Thomas Jefferson.
If you look at least the land mass, we've had more area of our government governed by top-down, unilateral, non-representative government for much longer than we have had actual representative government within the U.S.
When did we stop governing territories that way?
We haven't.
Here's how I understand what Maggie is saying. Imagine a circle. What's inside that circle is the United States government you know. It's got things like courts, elections, constitutional rights, local, state, and federal government. But the U.S. also governed people and places outside that circle. And outside the circle, the U.S. gave itself a different set of rules. And those rules were first created to colonize Indigenous people. The U.S. government controlled where we could live, what religion we could practice, what languages we could speak, what food we ate, how we raised our children, if we could even keep or have children, all against our will. So while our founders did build a democracy, they also built something else. You can call it empire, you can call it colonization, I call it authoritarianism. Top-down government that controlled the lands and lives of Indigenous people.
Do you think that most Americans think that what our government did to Native Americans affects them?
No.
Should they?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because we had to build a government to do that. We had to build a government to dispossess. We had to build a government to expand. We had to build a government that colonized. And that government is still our government.
A lot of what our government can and cannot do is based on precedent, which is a legal way of saying if our country did something before, it can do it again.
Especially if we've done it before a lot and you let us do it. We don't actually think through, was this a good idea when we did this quite a few times? The one area of exception is around the area of human enslavement and Jim Crow segregation. And those are areas where we have explicit constitutional amendments, as well as decisions that have later repudiated things.
The legacies of slavery and segregation are still with us. Just look at voter ID laws. But the policy of enslaving people is no longer legal.
But think in the area of Indian law, you don't get big amendments.
It's almost kind of scary. Like when you think about everything that our government did to Native Americans, that we've never gone back and like edited our government and said, oh, actually, like we really shouldn't commit genocide again. That was bad. Like we shouldn't put people in concentration camps again. What you're saying is like we've never had that edit.
So I dug really deeply into the question of Japanese American incarceration and Indian law. And come to find out, the 2 detention camps under the War Relocation Authority were built on Indian reservations. The Bureau of Indian Affairs actually ran and established the first camp because they knew how to detain people and govern them. The science of governing other people through force is sadly something that takes forms of expertise. And the U.S. developed that, and then they applied it to different and new people.
There's this feeling I have every time I talk to Maggie. This history is so important, but why don't more people know about it?
I think something that I'm grappling with is that, like, I feel like we're left out of the, like, America rah-rah version of the history. But I feel like we're also left out of the, like, the founding fathers were flawed. They made, like, women weren't, like, all these people weren't included. I feel like we're left out of that version, too.
Yes. Well, it's because if you bring in Native people and American colonialism into the constitutional and national story that we hold, it pulls a thread that unravels the entire myth at once.
Doing this reporting, I realized I don't fit into the story of American democracy. But I am still part of the origin story of this country. You actually can't understand this country without Indigenous people. Because what our history tells is the story of American authoritarianism. After the winter that Haudenosaunee refugees camped at Fort Niagara in 1779, they returned home. But not much was left. Following George Washington's orders, the colonial army had burned everything.
And the people who survived in the spring came back to Onondaga to rebuild with nothing.
This is Brad Powless.
My name is Tehoetati. I am from the Onondaga Nation.
Brad's father first told him the story when he was 15.
And he goes, it's a good thing. It's a sad story, but it's a good thing too. It's both at the same time.
When the Onondaga returned to their land, they saw what the army had burned. Their homes, their crops, their food stores, even their fruit orchards. People had barely survived that winter, and now they were facing more starvation. But then, something happened.
That's when our friend Ogwanyota came and provided a food source for us.
The cicadas came out. The people ate cicadas to survive. There's something really special about this. You see, the cicadas on Onondaga land live in one small area and only come out every 17 years. The rest of the time, they're hibernating. If this had happened any other year or any other place, the people would have starved. Brad gets emotional when he talks about this.
It really tears me up thinking about it. Is that something that the Creator gave us that year? I don't know.
I teared up too while talking to Brad. I know my ancestors went through hell so that me and my tribe would still exist. But this example is just so visceral. Brad taught me how to say cicada in Onondaga.
So, Ogwanyota.
Ogwanyota?
Yes, Ogwanyota.
Ogwanyota.
Hanyo.
The cicadas, or Ogwanyota, still come out on Onondaga land every 17 years. And it's quite a sight to see. The first time they came out, Brad was a teenager.
Oh, they are everywhere. Like you walk outside and they're just like rain dripping off the trees. They come out during the summer. The trees are all green and beautiful. My mom was like, you got to get ready to pick them because you got to pick them early. So you get up early in the morning and you're going through and you're picking them off the trees. If you're really young, you're a little scared because they're a big bug with big red eyes.
Nowadays, when the Ogwanyota come out, the Onondaga fry them and eat them. Families make it together. People bring big batches to share at summer ceremonies.
What does it taste like?
Everyone always says chicken, but it's always it's its own unique flavor for sure. I guess the most similar thing would be like kind of like a popcorn. You get a nice little buttery base, then you get your butter nice and melted, and you throw your cicada in, little salt and pepper, and that's all you need.
The Onondaga didn't always eat bugs. At first, they did it to survive. And now, they do it to remember.
The times in your life that you've eaten cicadas or Ogwanyota, do you think about your ancestors?
Definitely.
There's something almost poetic about the way the Ogwanyota come out every 17 years. It means once every generation, there's this material way for the community to remember what their ancestors went through. And in one person's life, you learn the story as a child, you pass it on to your children in middle age, and tell it again as an elder.
Do you consider Sullivan's campaign an act of genocide?
Of course it is.
Like when you read George Washington's letter to General Sullivan, like the goal is really to drive you all out, to get you away from your land. Was that successful?
We're still here. We lost so many people. So that's sad to think about. But no, we still stayed and we were able to come back home.
You know, for Indigenous people, it's not like this stuff is easy to talk about. It's overwhelming how much our ancestors lost. But we find ways, big and small, to remember. Because without that, we wouldn't know who we are and how we got here. The same is true for the United States. Genocide shaped and changed our country. And until we process that violence, we won't know who we are or how we got here. There's this war you've probably never heard of, but it's why our president can use the military the way that he does.
My ancestors put dirt in those soldiers' mouths to say, if you're going to get our homelands, this is the only way you're going to get it.
Next time on First America. If you like what you're hearing, please leave a review. It's one of the best ways to help listeners find this show. You can also support First America by subscribing or sharing episodes with your friends. First America was made possible by the generous support of the Henry Luce Foundation and the NYU Yale American Indian Sovereignty Project. Additional support came from Indian Collective, First Nations Development Institute, Yahavia Tom of San Manuel Nation, Borealis Philanthropy, and Black Liberation Indigenous Sovereignty Collective. Our fiscal sponsor is Red Media. I dreamed this project into the world in collaboration with an amazing group of Indigenous scholars, including Maggie Blackhawk, Fond du Lac Ojibwe, Ned Blackhawk, citizen of the Timok tribe of Western Shoshone, Phil Deloria, descendant of the Standing Rock and Yankton Sioux tribes, and Nick Estes, citizen of the Lower Brule Sioux tribe. I, Rebecca Nagel, citizen of Cherokee Nation, also reported, wrote, hosted, and executive produced the show. First America is produced by Critical Frequency and distributed by Pushkin Industries. Our managing producer is Amy Westervelt. Senior producer and sound designer is Brendan Baker. Our story editor is Audrey Quinn. Jules Bradley, Kim Nettervie Petersa, and Jordan Gass Pore are our producers. Our editorial consultant is Connie Walker, citizen of the Oconee First Nation, fact-checking by Naomi Barr. Our partnerships director is Lindsay Crowder. Our development consultant is Jenny Lawton. Our theme song is by Raven Chacon, who is Danae. Scoring by Laura Ortman, citizen of the White Mountain Apache Tribe, and Raven Chacon. Artwork by Kelly Gonzalez, citizen of Cherokee Nation. The team at Pushkin is Greta Cohn, CEO, Eric Sandler, Chief Strategy Officer, Grace Ross, VP of Business Development, Morgan Ratner, Director of Marketing, Owen Miller, Content Delivery Associate, Kira Posey, Creative Partnerships Manager, Jordan McMillan, Social Media Manager, Brian Strabenik, Senior Analytics Manager, and Jake Flanagan, Production Counsel. Special thanks this episode to David Jones, Paul Kelton, Yenzuva Getatil, Jeffrey Ostler, and Natani Nota, citizen of Navajo Nation. Research help from James Anthony Owen.